Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. Well, the channel is now 15 months old, and this week we just passed the 10,000 subscriber point. I'm still a little bit stunned how 10,000 people want to watch this old bloke just ramble on about his hobby, but hey, it's got to be time for a full-blown ramble, hasn't it? See you after the intro. Okay, welcome back. So, 10,000 subscribers. It sort of bypassed me this week. I've been away in London all week since the lockdown that has ended for me, really. In the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been working full time. It's been pretty manic, and I spent the last week working in East London. Reminded me of how difficult it is to park anywhere or to get anywhere quickly. So glad to be back in Lancashire, but got back Thursday night and looked at my channel and I saw it had clicked over 10,000, and I knew we were en route to it, but to actually see that in black and white was amazing. I can only say thank you guys for watching the channel and subscribing and supporting it as you have. I don't quite know what it is that I do that makes people want to subscribe, because I don't script my videos. I don't plan them to the nth degree. I tend to have a think in the morning about what I'm going to do, and generally speaking, it's something I've been playing with during the week. But 10,000 subscribers, oh wow, that's a real milestone, and in 15 months, I think that's pretty good going. Especially as I'm not one of these channels who is able to do, 3, 4, 5 videos a week. Whilst I'm working full time, it tends to be restricted to a video at the weekend, and I'll do more if I can. It's not been possible recently because I've not been at home, but thank you so much. There's obviously some sort of market out there for people watching an old bloke playing with his hobby, and that's what this channel is about, really. So, wow, I don't know where we go from here. Probably exactly the same as we've been going so far. I have great plans as far as keeping this channel is going. It's remained a hobby for me, and my primary motivation for doing it is because I enjoy doing it, and it gives me some sort of sounding board to talk about what I've been doing during the week on Linux. And I do read your comments. I know it normally takes me till the Saturday to go through them and answer them, but I do kind of keep an eye on them during the week. And it's great. And it also gives me ideas about what I'm going to do. In fact, the big thing about running this channel for me, it's been a two-way process. I've enjoyed making the videos, and I've learned a lot about video editing and the production side of things. But I've also learned more about Linux, and it sort of triggered my enthusiasm again. And it's got me watching YouTube videos. So, I'm a big fan of the likes of DT and Luke Smith and Chris Titus Tech, and I do watch their channels. And this year, after being a 16-year Linux user, the biggest thing for me has been tiling window managers. And it was only 6 months ago that I had to play with OpenBox, and I've moved through the whole range of tiling window managers since then, and really enjoyed them, to the extent that I now use tiling window managers as my default because I find them comfortable. I mean, I started on i3, I had a little play with Awesome, and to be honest, I was quite unfair with those window managers because it was all so unfamiliar to me that I sort of moved on quite quickly. And it was only when I got to BSPWM that I stayed in that for a month, and I got to really like it. I've then moved on to Spectre WM, or Spectrum, however you pronounce it, and I really like that. I then spent a month in Xmonad. I really like that. Very similar to Spectre WM, actually, in many ways, but obviously a lot more configurable. And then DWM. DWM has been a bit of a surprise to me. It was quite annoying to get it all patched and to get it working as I wanted to get it working. But it's one of those window managers that, whilst it takes a bit of effort to get it right, once it's done, it's done. And I love the portability of these things, that I upload all my dot files to my GitLab page, and if I installed a new operating system, I've just got to git clone it, and I've got everything up and running as I want it, pretty quickly. However, it's been time to move on. So today, I'm going to kind of have a look at my latest move to Herbstluftwm, which is a window manager I've not looked at before. And in some ways, it's a little bit like BSPWM. There's this concept of frames. It's a manual tiler. And I've got it configured now, but I'm not used to working with it. So I'll show you where I'm up to. Once we've had a chat around that, I thought, what else am I going to talk about? Oh, yeah. I've mentioned a few times that I still have a Windows partition on my NVMe drive on this machine. And the amount of times that I've booted into it over the last 12 months wouldn't fill the fingers of one hand. I keep it there for one reason and one reason only, and that's for doing firmware upgrades on the SSDs and for doing BIOS upgrades. Now, I could do a BIOS upgrade just with a USB stick on this Intel machine that I've got, my little Intel NUC. But I have found that on some SSDs, it's Windows firmware updates only. So it's just provided a method of doing. However, something's happened this week that got me raging, and I'll tell you about that in a second. I'm then going to finish with an update, really, on the internet situation that I have here, which has been frustrating to say the least. And I'm going to combine that with my garden cabin, which, as you know, is now completed, and I want to move into there eventually, but it's all about getting a decent internet connection there. Well, moves have been afoot, and hopefully by next weekend that should be done. But anyway, enough of that for now. I'll put the timings of these different sections down in the video information. Let's start by looking at Herbstluftwm. One of the great things that I've found about using these tiling window managers is that it doesn't really matter what your distro is. Most distros have the tiling window managers in their repositories. And what you can see in front of you, this green screen, is the default version of Herbstluftwm that I've installed on Gecko Linux. I still had the VM from last week's review on, so I just installed Herbstluftwm on it. And initially, it's big into green, a little bit like OpenSUSE, and you won't get anything. You won't get a bar, you won't get any icons, and initially, the mod key is set to Alt. I've actually changed it to the super key just for ease. And if I hit the super key, the Windows key in other words, plus the Enter key, it will open Xterm, essentially, because it's not configured to use anything else. Now, what you will want to do right from the word go is create a configuration file. Now, luckily, you'll find a default one in the etc xdg Herbstluftwm auto start folder. So you would do cp etc xdg Herbstluft, and then you'll find something called auto start, and you'd want to copy that to .config, and you'll need to create this directory Herbstluftwm into auto start. Now, I've already done this. And as long as you do this, you'll have something to work with. So let me just delete this. And I'm not sure whether I've got Vim on here, so I'm just going to use nano, and I'm going to open up the configuration file. So .config, Herbstluft, auto start, and this is what you get. Now, I have to say, of all the window managers I've looked at, I think Herbstluft has the simplest configuration file. It's essentially just a bash script, and it works pretty well. You'll see down here that what I've done is I've commented the mod is equal to mod 1, which would be the alt key, and I've uncommented mod equals mod 4. So I've done that, and I'm now using the super key. So how does this actually work? Well, let's just keep this open for the time being, and let me hit the super key and enter again. And you can see it opens another terminal. Now, I may not want to keep what Herbstluft would call a horizontal layout like this. I might want to change layouts and have it as what they call a vertical layout. I have to say the concept of vertical and horizontal is a bit the other way around for me. Or I might just want it as a monocle layout, full screen. But let's keep it as that. I'm hitting the super key plus the space bar to do that. And to move between these different windows, well, I have options. I can just use the mod key plus left and right, or I can use the mod key and the Vim keys, H and L. One of the things that it does have, it uses this concept of a frame, and I can split a frame. Everything seems to be embedded in a frame. In fact, looking at the Herbstluft FAQ, it says a little bit like this about this. It says basically you've got a few things you can do when you're tiling. Initially, there is one frame, and each frame has one of two possible types. It can either serve as a container for windows, which is, I suppose, what we've got here. It's serving as a container for windows, and I can switch the focus between them. Or it can be split into subframes by using the mod O or the mod U command. So let's hit mod O, and it's created another frame for me. Okay, if I wanted to move to that frame, I can again use the Vim keys, and then if I open a terminal, it will open in that frame. I can also use the mod U, and the mod U would create another frame under there. I can move to that and open another terminal there. So it's a manual tiler. You decide how the windows are going to appear in this window manager. So unlike a dynamic tiler, which has a set of layouts which will just work automatically, this does its own thing. So how do I shut a window? Well, mod shift C. Yep. And I'll do mod shift C as well. Again, where am I now? Mod shift C. And you'll see that the frames are still in place. But if I move to those frames and then hit mod R, it will get rid of them. And then to just close the program down, I do mod shift C. It's a bit strange. It's something I'm sure I could get used to. And in actual fact, all the key bindings and how you work with frames and what have you seems to be fairly straightforward. So there we go. Yep, all good. And if I wanted to change the size of that frame, I'm just looking down here to see how I would do that. Resizing frames. Resize the left frame would be mod control left. Okay, so mod control left. This isn't a frame, is it? That's the problem. So let me open up another one and split that. And open that up. Mod control. There we go. Anyway, you get the idea. It's going to take a little bit of getting used to, I'm sure, with having frames and windows set within frames. And I've only just set it up, so I'm still playing with it. So this is your basics. This is what you get. And in that sense, Herbstluftwm is no different to any other of the tiling window managers that I've tried, in that it is pretty basic when you first set it up, and you need to configure it to your liking. So let's move over and see what I've done with mine so far. So we're back on my Arch system now, and you should see my Herbstluftwm in front of you. And it looks a little bit different to the one you've just seen in Gecko Linux, in that I've applied my own colour schemes, and you'll see that there's a bar there. It's actually polybar. I went for polybar as opposed to what many people seem to use as the bar in Herbstluft. Dozen. I'm not quite don't quite know how you pronounce that, but simply because I already had a polybar configuration for BSPWM, and it was relatively straightforward to just add an additional section in to get polybar working on this. And I think it looks pretty good. I've used some of my scripts that I've used in DWM and some of the standard modules in polybar. By the way, it's all up on my GitLab if you want to have a look at it. And I'm using some icons here that you should see from the awesome icon set. This window that I've got embedded on the bottom right hand side shows my multi-screen setup, and I wanted to show this because I'm still getting used to actually using this. So if you look at that window down there, I've now set it up so that if I do Super Shift H, I move the window that you were seeing before straightforwardly onto the next monitor. If I do Mod Shift L, I move Vim and the configuration file back to the main layout. Let me just turn that off now. So you see the configuration file here. I've added a few auto start items, so PyCom for transparency, nitrogen. I've added the Polkit agent from Mate, and I found that I've had to set my key map to UK on every window manager so far, so I just use that in the auto start entry. I've set my terminal to Alacrity. I've pretty much stuck with many of the basics, but I've added all my custom keys here. So keys to open Chromium, PCMan FM, GM Run, Genie, dmenu FM, Rofi, etc., etc. And other than that, what have I done? Oh yeah, I've added some extras that I found on the Herbstluftwm page, so that I can use the Mod Shift and Vim keys to shift windows between monitors. And yeah, on the tags, I've reduced it to 6 tags, and rather than naming them, I'm using icons. And what else have I done? I've changed the colours. You won't find any glaring green on here, but that's fairly straightforward. You can see all the colour codes there. I've tried to stay with my Nord colour theme. And for the multi-monitors, I had to put in this setup, which was a bit of trial and error, to be honest. I have two 1920 by 1080 screens, and I like my polybar to be 27 pixels deep. So essentially what I've done is I've subtracted 27 pixels off the 1920 by 1080. So that comes to 1080 reduces to 1053. And I've added the additional 27 pixels to give room for polybar. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me just quit out of here and shut this. And I've changed all my key bindings round so that they essentially mirror what I'm used to. So if I wanted to, I don't know, start my Rofi, I would do Super Alt Spacebar, and there's my Rofi to choose everything, which I'm really quite comfortable with. If I wanted to start my file manager, it would be Super Alt F, and there we go. Rather than using Super Shift C, I don't know why I've got into the habit. I think it might have been with BSPWM. I've got in the habit of setting the closer window to Super W. And everything else is there, whatever I want. So, Genie, there we go, text editor, etc. So, let's shut that down. I've not really played with this fully yet, so I'm intending to live in it for the next 4 or 5 weeks. The first week is normally setting everything up, and as normal, I've been setting up the bar, and I'm pretty happy with how the bar's looking at the moment. I've got the weather, the temperature here. As you can see, it's coming down to a more comfortable level. I've got the CPU, the memory usage, network down, network up, the CPU core temperature, and then a little script that shows the number of updates that are available in Arch, both Pacman and AUR, and then of course the time and date. So this is where I'm up to now, and I'm going to live with it for a while. It feels a little bit like BSPWM at the moment, with a few differences. The way that the workspaces operate, it's like Xmonad to an extent, in that you only have a single set of workspaces distributed across monitors, whereas in BSPWM, I think I had workspaces 1 to 4 on my primary screen and 5 to 8 on my secondary screen. I don't really mind which way it works. It's just a case of getting used to it. So let's go and have a chat. So yeah, that's where I'm up to. It looks promising, Herbstluftwm. I suppose there's going to be a point when I have to ask myself, which one am I going to stick with? And the longer I can put that off, the better, because I like playing. At the moment, if I'm honest, in terms of the way things work, it's a neck and neck tie between DWM and Xmonad. For me, I think they're the two I felt the most comfortable with. I actually found DWM easier to configure than Xmonad, because the patching process is pretty straightforward once you get used to it. Whereas Haskell, it just blows my mind. And no, I don't want to learn Haskell. I really don't. But, from standing on the shoulders of giants, the likes of DT, that's helped me a lot to get something up and running. And in fact, I've borrowed from other people's configs, including DT's, with the Herbstluft setup. So, I don't know. If I was to ask myself which window manager am I tending to boot into by default at the moment, it's generally DWM. Simply because I've become very comfortable with it, and I do like it. I do like it a lot, and I don't think it gets enough love. And possibly that's because the Suckless guys aren't exactly what you would call user-friendly, but it is a great window manager. Nevertheless, let's do a month in Herbstluftwm and see where I get to. And after that, there's really probably only one more window manager that I want to look at, and that's Qtile. And Qtile was a little bit like Xmonad at the beginning. I really struggled to configure it back in the day, and I failed. But when I came back, I've managed to get Xmonad up and running now, and I'm determined I'll get Qtile up and running, and then we'll see where we go from there. Perhaps at that point it's time to return to i3 now I've got more of an idea what I'm doing, and also perhaps Awesome. But I can see that keeping me occupied for quite a while. Right, so time to move on. Windows and Windows updates. So Windows, okay. I don't generally talk about Windows here because I see it as a system I'm forced to use on occasion with work, but I have had it installed on my home system for the reasons that I specified earlier for firmware upgrades. Anyway, this week, in fact, I think it was last weekend, Sunday, I thought to myself, it's a long time since I've booted into Windows, and it's possibly time to run some upgrades, as annoying as that is, and I'll just start the process and I'll leave it to get on with whatever it gets on with. So I did that. I booted into Windows and let it do its updates, and it updated to the latest version, whatever version that is, and it took hours, and I rebooted and it seemed to have, done fine. So, okay, good. Let's come out of there and go back into Linux, thinks I. And I used the refined window manager, and I found that really good for multi-booting. So I rebooted Windows, and up pops refined, all good. And there's my Arch Linux icon, and I hit it, and it goes into the Grub Rescue screen. So I'm thinking, what's going on here? So I rebooted again, and this time I booted a distro I have on one of my external SSDs. I booted Void Linux, and that has my Arch system on the Grub menu there. I thought I'll get in that way, and maybe something wrong with refined. I got the Grub Rescue screen again, so I thought, right, what's going on here? And luckily, I had Arch Linux, the bootable ISO, already installed on a USB stick. So I booted the system, and I had a look at what had actually happened. And let me just move to the next screen so you can see. I've just ran sudo fdiskl here, and the device we're looking at is this one. That's my NVMe drive. That's the main drive that is in my Intel NUC. And as you can see, Windows creates this Windows recovery environment, 499 megs at the beginning. It creates an EFI partition, and it creates a Microsoft reserved partition. I'm not entirely sure what any of those are. Oh, and a Microsoft basic data partition. No idea. A lot of partitions, not really sure what they all do. Haven't taken a lot of notice of it. And what used to be the case on here was my Arch system was installed on the fifth partition on this NVMe drive, which was called NVMe 0N1P5. Well, I ran an fdisk, and the first thing I saw was that during the upgrade process, Windows 10 had created an additional partition, another Windows recovery environment of 561 megs. Now, it's not taken any space off my Linux system. It's obviously shrunk one of its own partitions, but nevertheless, that has meant that my Linux partition is now the sixth partition on this NVMe drive, not the fifth partition, which said a lot about, why I was unable to boot into Linux. So I was a bit, oh my God, what's going on here? So I did the normal things. I mounted the sixth partition as root. I mounted the EFI system. I remade the RAM disk, and I reinstalled Grub, and I rebooted, and okay, everything was fine again. It was working. But I was just thinking about this. I mean, I've never really had a problem with Windows because I have never, ever had issues with it. I've always known enough to work with it, and when the odd issue came up, I've always been able to fix it. But just the fact that willy-nilly it has decided to create another partition, which has caused the partition I've had Linux on to be renamed. How rude. How rude can you get? So really irritated at that. And as a result, I'm starting to think that just having a Windows system on this NVMe drive for firmware updates, I'm not going to bother with it anymore. I'm appalled. I really am appalled that it would do something like this. Just takes no notice of whatever else you may have on that on your drive, and so can screw up the configuration and just carries on regardless. Dreadful, absolutely dreadful, I think. So I have a question for you guys, really. Before I go ahead and do this, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of Windows altogether on this drive. And ideally, I don't really want to have to do a full reinstall of my Arch system, which is working really well. So my thoughts are, okay, boot up a G-parted disk on a USB stick, delete all the Windows partitions, obviously leave the EFI drive there, and expand Arch to cover the entire drive. Now, I know I'm probably going to have to remake the RAM disk, and I'm going to have to reinstall Grub and go through that process again. But is that likely to cause me other issues? Someone out there who perhaps knows a bit more than me. Is it possible? Because if so, I'm going to get on and do it. I've had it with Windows now. I've never been one of those who criticise Windows systems and Mac systems, but doing something like this has just got my goat. I'm horrified. So if they can all be deleted and I can just use the rest of the space and expand my current system, and that's going to be fairly straightforward, just with remaking a RAM disk and reinstalling Grub, please let me know below. Right, let's finish this off by talking a little bit about where I'm up to with my internet. Right, so the internet situation. For a while now, I've wanted to do live streams, and I've been hampered by my internet connection. Not so much the down speed, I get about 30 meg down, but I've been struggling to get 2+ meg up. And I'd done a few private live videos just to do a test to see what they work like, and they weren't great. It was really buffering. So I've been on a bit of a mission to see if I can try and sort something out. Surprisingly, I don't know how many of you caught me on the podcast with Tyler's Tech that I was on a few weeks ago, where I was actually live and he was recording me live on Discord, and it seemed to work okay. But I'm still having problems with YouTube Live. So I'd set my stall out to try and get something better. Now, I'm in a village, so I haven't got a lot of options. I have to work with what I have. And when we first came to this village back in 2012, I tried the standard ADSL, and it was copper wires coming over by telegraph cables, and I was struggling to get 1 meg down, to be honest, and that was when there was nobody else using it. But I discovered a really great internet service, called Boundless, by the way, for rural areas, and it was wireless ADSL. And I had a little dish installed on the roof by the chimney pot, and it pointed at an antenna over on the moors. I don't know how many miles away over on the moors, but anyway, it worked well. And I only got a 20 meg down, so it wasn't massively fast, but I got 10 meg up. So I thought, great, this is working well. I wasn't running my internet connection then. My YouTube channel then. But yeah, it seemed great. Then we moved house in the same village, and I had these guys come and do a survey to make sure that the internet could be fitted again, and there was no go. Apparently the antenna couldn't be seen, there was no line of sight, and they just weren't picking up a signal. So I said, okay, well, we'll go with what's there. And the guy who'd lived here before me, there was an EE router here, so I thought, well, if EE is already here, let's go the EE route. Of course, it never works that way. I still had to wait 2 weeks for it to all be switched on. But nevertheless, I managed to get it up and running that way. And in the UK, we have a network which is essentially owned by British Telecom. And although there are lots of different providers, they all hop on that network. So you get the speed you get. And we'd had fibre put in a cabinet somewhere in the village not so many months ago. And it did at least make a usable connection. I got 30 meg down and 2-ish up. It was meant to be up to 6 up, but it never has been. And I've lived with that. And then a month or so ago, I thought, let's give Boundless a ring and see if anything's changed, if they've got any more antennas up. So I did, and they said, well, yeah, we have got more antennas up. Do you want us to come out and do a survey? I said, yeah, go for it. I was at the end of my minimum contract on EE, so out they came on a really wet and rainy day. And they clambered onto the roof. Cost me £75 for this, by the way. And it was a commitment to £75 whatever happened. And they came down and they said, well, we can see it, but we're not managing to pick up a signal. There's too much interference. So I said, oh, right, okay, well, plan B. At the same time, though, they broke a load of roof tiles while they were clambering up on the roof. It's quite an old house. And we're still at the point of negotiating them coming back to fix them before I give them anything to do with that £75. So I thought, right, well, what else can I do? And I had a ring around, and I spoke to Vodafone, who told me that they could actually get me 57 meg down and 9 up. And I said to them, well, I don't understand how you can do that, because you're all using British Telecom's network. Why is it that you're able to provide faster speeds than they can? And they said, oh, they give me some guff about, well, we've still got the old cable and wireless network lines out there, and we've got low contention ratios, etc., etc. So I said, okay, well, I'll take you at your word. Get it done. Switch it on. So they gave me a date when it would all be switched over. And 3 or 4 days before it was switched over, nothing had arrived, no router, no nothing. And so I was getting a bit concerned, and I rang them and I said, nothing's arrived yet. And they had a look, and they said, oh, yeah, there's a problem here. They've taken your order, but they forgot to send out the equipment. Right, so what does that actually mean for me? You better get the equipment here pretty damn smart, because it's meant to be switched on in a couple of days. Yeah, that's going to delay that, they said. It's going to take another 10 days before we can activate you because of this. Our fault entirely. We're so sorry, blah, 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 blah. So I said, well, that's going to leave me without an internet connection for 10 days because EE are due to switch theirs off. So they said, well, there's nothing we can do about it. So after demanding to speak to a manager and not managing to escalate the call, just getting a load of guff about furlough, nobody's about, I said, oh, just forget it all. And I went back to EE and I made sure that the cancellation was cancelled, and I'm still with the original connection. But I had a long talk with EE about the cabin. I've got this cabin that's been built at the bottom of the garden that I eventually want to be turned into a studio. And I said, is there any possibility you could come out and lay an Ethernet cable, down to the cabin? And they said, well, yes, we could, but this will cost so much, which was quite a lot of money. But they said, have you thought of using a 4G router with an antenna in the cabin? And I said, no, I haven't. I said, because to be honest, I do know that the 4G signal inside buildings in this area is rubbish. But I do also know that the external, the outside signal isn't too bad. So they said, well, see what you think and give us a ring. So my wife's actually got an EE phone, so I took that out in the garden by the cabin and I did a speed test, and I was getting around 35 down and 9 up on 4G. So I thought, well, that's great. You know, that's a big difference. I went inside the cabin, that dropped to about 3 meg down and about 2 meg up. So that got rid of any advantages. So I rang them and they said, well, yeah, that's great. If you're picking up a signal outside, what we can do is we can fit an antenna to the cabin and kind of feed it in and attach it to your router so it's picking up the signal from outside. And it also amplifies the 4G signal. So I've arranged for all this. I've got the router, the 4G router inside, which is giving me the pathetic speeds that I expect from EE or any network provider, to be honest, in a rural village. It's not their fault. And on Thursday, a guy's coming to fit this antenna. Now, if that can give me 35 down and 9 up, which it should, we're probably good to go as far as live streaming is concerned. So that's the plan. It seems to be a lot of hard work to get proper internet in the rural community. And I'd rather live in a village than anywhere else, but I've had to jump through a few hoops. So if any of you are wondering why I'm not in the cabin yet, that part of it's been this internet issue. The other part has been that since I've been on furlough for 3.5 months or so on, I took a fairly big financial hit, and I do need a bit of furniture in there to make it usable. So that's being built up now that I'm back at work. But it looks like we may be there soon. And if I can live stream, that makes life, well, for me, so much easier because it cuts out all the video editing and everything else. And it means I'll probably get another a video out each week. And I can do live streams for the patrons and the occasional live stream for all of you guys out there. And it just gives me another option. So in terms of what's going to happen in the future, that's what I'm looking at. And believe me, it's not been a simple process, as you've just heard. But anyway, I think that'll do for this ramble, this 10K ramble. I thought it was high time we had a proper me just going on about nothing on earth. So we'll call it an end here. I hope you enjoyed this. I really do. I think it's as normal. I'm going to be continuing from here. We're probably not going to see more than one video a week in the short term, but I am looking at getting that up to 2 videos a week, with one of them being live. So before I finish, I would just like to say thank you so much to my patrons. I have to say that Patreon has helped me a lot, because the money from Patreon has bought the antenna and it has bought the 4G router. So it's enabling me to get to the next stage. So thanks very much to all of my members: Corbinian Schilderman, Robert Boudreau, Gary Moore, Aristotelis Papa Giorgio, I'm sorry, mate, I always struggle with your name, Stormpick, Stephen Cross, Mike Long, David Bird, Entropy UK, Richard Wade, Ty Gare, Philip Espy, Forrest Rhodes, and our newest member, Scott Russell. We're now at 14 patrons. Wow. And you guys are helping this channel all it can be, become all it can be over the next year. So thank you so much. Please join me on Library, and you'll also find me on Facebook. We've got a really active group there if you want to come and join us, or any of the other channels or social media outlets that I'm on. I forget them myself sometimes. Cheers, guys. See you next week.